if we go to our Dropbox, class materials, and if we look at class 3, if we go to class 3, we've got this file right here, RSF, with the date 2/10/20. If you could those of you that want to follow along, download that and unzip it. So you download that and then unzip it, and you'll get this session. And our lesson today will be working with that session and learning some new MIDI techniques. All right, so I'm just going to move on while you guys are doing that, and I'm going to talk about this for a second. So what I've got here, I'm not going to start doing any editing for a couple of minutes. Hopefully those of you that want to download this will be able to get that together while I'm talking. I've got a piece here that I recorded for piano, just for piano. And I've done block chords in my left hand and a melody in my right hand. So I've got 2 piano tracks, one for the melody and one for the chords. And do I have these active? Yes, I do. So let's just take a listen to this. It's a short piece. Okay, so this sounds like a late 1970s, early 1980s pop ballad. And we want to do an arrangement for this, right? So I put together a little ensemble here, right? Flutes, oboe, strings, bells, tambourine, steel string guitar, and electric bass. And we're going to use some editing techniques to just take this material and put it onto different areas here to create an arrangement. Now, before we start actually doing that, let's take a look at what I've done. So I've set up my ensemble here in kind of a way that makes sense to me. I've got my winds together, so I've got my flute and my oboe, and flute is a higher pitched instrument than an oboe. So I've got it on a higher space in the edit window. Then I've got strings. I'm just going to use an ensemble string patch. I'm not going to break it out into violin 1, violin 2, violas, cellos, and basses, but just use ensemble string patch. Then I've got some percussion, bells and tambourine, right? Pitched percussion. I have a steel string guitar and an electric bass. So if we take a look at this here, then we open this up in our MIDI editor. Again, I can hover along the top border here. The grabber or the cursor becomes a cross. Click and I can drag up. And then I'm also going to move to this view so you could see what my left hand is doing here, which I think will be very helpful. If we look at this, this is very, very easily delineated out, right? You could see that in this area here are strings, or chords, and in this area here is a bass line, right? That's pretty easy to see, I think. So I'm going to click over here and activate the melody part. So what I want to do is I'm going to solo the melody and take a listen to it. All right, now, it's pretty well played, And you could certainly leave it like this, right? You could see if I zoom in, it sounds fine, but it's not perfect rhythmically. And if this was the real world, I would leave it as it is and just deal with it because it sounds human. So I'm going to show you some alternative ways to fix the timing. Now that I've taught you, that we went over how to do it manually using the trim tool and the grabber tool and snapping things to grid. There are easier ways to do things, or quicker ways to do things. But I always like to start off with doing things manually. It gives you good mouse skills. It teaches you how to use these tools. So it's really good to start off like that. And we'll get to that in a second. But if we look at the phrase here at the beginning, it's two phrases, each 2 bars long. 1, 2, 3. Second phrase. It's an answer to the first phrase. Then a new phrase here. Again, 2 bars long. Or you could think of this as 1 bar, a pickup and another bar, and then the same thing and leading to the end. So understanding the phrase structure of a melody is really helpful in learning how to orchestrate the melody. And we will get into that shortly. So when you're doing your piece and you're orchestrating it, you guys are doing it for simple numbers of instrument. But if you want to expand this, understanding phrase structure will be very helpful with creating your orchestrations. Very helpful. But let's get this timing better at the beginning here. Now, you could see that it's all a little ahead of the beat, right? So I was having you click and drag and snap it to the grid. Let's learn how to quantize. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to drag. It doesn't matter what tool you have. I'm up in the ruler area here and I'm after the last note. And I'm going to click and drag all the way to the beginning so that all that is selected. And I'm going to do Option and the number 0. And that brings us up the Event Operations window. Each one of these notes here is an event. That's an event. That's another event. That's another event. As a matter of fact, there is a Midi event list in Pro Tools, which I never look at. When I first started sequencing in the computer with a studio with Vision back in the early 90s, I used to use the event list all the time. But this is just a list that tells you of every event on the piano track, a melody track, right? And it tells you where it starts and what the pitch is. This is the velocity, this is the release velocity, and this is how long each one of those events are. You can select notes from the event list. I don't use it. It's useful, I guess, to know what it is. It has all these other functions. So I think I can't remember the last time I actually used this. But each one of these things is an event, and this is the event operations window. Now, if you look right here, it says quantize. So that's the function that we're going to do to the event. Click on this, and it's got all of these other functions. You can change the velocity, you can change the duration, you can transpose, you can select split notes, which I'll show you when we look at the chords. You can input quantize, step input, restore performance, flatten performance. So I never use these last two, and I never use input quantize. I use step input occasionally. I use all of these other ones all the time. So let's take a look at some of these. All right. So I want to quantize. The first thing I want to do is I want to see what my note values are. So right here, it looks like I've got an eighth note because it's on bar 1. It's about bar 1, beat 2, and 480. So that's the second eighth note. But if I go over here, I've got 2 notes in that space. So that means that those are what's called 16th notes for those of you that are not music, don't know music in that, which most of you do, though. I think almost all of you do. So I want to, what you want to quantize. You want to quantize the note on, and don't worry about the note off. Preserve note duration. So you want to quantize the note on. That is the beginning, or what's called the transient of the note. And the quantized grid should be what the fastest or the smallest note value is. So ours is a 16th note, so I'm going to click on that and select 16th notes. The tuplet means that you can quantize to any tuplet. So let's say that you've got a tuplet like a triplet, a quintuplet, a septuplet. A quintuplet is 5 notes in the space of 4. A septuplet is 7 notes in the space of 6 or 4, depends on how you set it up. But let's say these were 16th note triplets, you would have 3 in the time of 2. We don't have triplets here, but if you had something that was like ticket to ticket to ticket to ticket to, you could work on the quantizing and changing it to whatever the tuplet is. If you engage the tuplet and it's only on a couple of tracks, make sure you turn it off because you won't be able to quantize to a straight grid afterwards. Let's not worry about randomize. And for right now, I'll get to strength in a second. Let's take this. Let's take this and let's go back and select our first 4 measures like this. And the apply button is going to turn blue or gray in this case, right? That means it's active. Now I'm going to zoom in and you see how this note here, right here, is a little ahead of the grid. When I hit apply, boom, you see how it got snapped to that grid? So all these notes got snapped to the grid as far as the attack of the note. Now, I said not to worry about note off, but let's take a look at his. If we wanted to make sure that our notes did not overlap, which here it's not a big deal here, you could leave it this way. You could also quantize the note off. So do you see how this note here overlaps past the beginning of this note and the end of this note overlaps after this note? Well, you could also clean that up too. See how it just snapped everything to grid? And this makes it perfect. That doesn't mean it makes it musical. It just means it makes it perfect. And you know, you shouldn't learn how to do that. And every sequencer, every software has quantizing. Excuse me, every DAW has quantizing. Quantizing has been around since the beginning of sequencing. So when I showed you the video of that guy with the big modular synthesizer rig, one of the things that he did was he inserted a quantizer into the signal path so that every note played was quantized to a musical pitch. Without that, you could get notes that would be between A and B flat, right? They'd be like halfway between an A and a B flat or an A sharp. And you could get things that didn't really quantize to the tempered scale that we have now. We're here quantizing to the grid, the duration, right? So we're just basically using this function to automatically snap these notes to the grid. So this is perfect. What if you do something and you like the feel of it, but it's just a little bit too sloppy for you, right? So you don't want to make it perfect. You just want to make it a little bit better. Let's show you that. So let me select you can see the next few ones. I've got also on the next phrase, I've got some notes that are not quite right. And like I said, if I was sequencing this, I'd probably leave it the way it is because it sounds fine. But I'm trying to teach you some of these functions. so that you could learn them. I'm going to select the next two measures, and you've got options right here. So if I select strength and I make it 94%, let's watch what happens to this note here. So it made it 94% quantized. You see how it's still a little bit before the beat? Like the beat is here and it's a little bit before, but it's not this much. So it made it more quantized, but not perfectly on the grid. So I'm just going to fix everything for the rest of the piece like that. It's done. And that's quantized. Now, let's take a look at this one here, our piano accompaniment. This one looks like I quantized this one already. All right, great. So now we can start to work. I want to create a bass line first. So I said that the bass was in the piano track. There's two ways to get the bass out of the piano track. This is one way. I can just lasso all these notes, right? Oops, excuse me. Let me do that again. I can just lasso all these notes like this. And at the end, I've got two notes selected. I can hold the shift key down and click, and then that will be unselected. And we need to select this one also. And our bass line is selected. I can copy this and paste this onto the bass track. That's one way to do it, right? Another way to do it, and let me show you. So I'm copying that. And then I'm going to go to the bass track here. And I make sure it measure 1. And I'm just going to, right. And then I'm just going to merge paste. So merge paste is Option and the letter M, like Mary. So when you merge paste, what's great about that is that it takes the name from the track. Let me show you what I mean by that. If I go to piano 2, let's say I go to piano 2 to piano 1, and I copy this right here, and let's say I paste it on the steel string track. You'll notice that this says steel string. This says piano. So the clip is not properly named. This still says piano. However, if I merge paste, it takes on the name of the track. So that's a really important thing that you need to learn. Okay? So I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to delete this. Now let me show you another trick. This one's a little bit more advanced, but I think you can handle it. I'm going to double click on this so that's opened. Highlighted, and then I'm going to right click I'm going to go Event Operations, select Split Note. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to select the bottom one note of each chord, and then we apply. And then if we do copy, which is Command C, right? And I'm going to go over this again and then merge paste this on to our electric bass. It gives us a few too many notes, but we can easily delete them and get rid of them, right? So you could do that. Or if you open this up, if you want to select the bass notes, right? What you can do is you can look here on the Midi keyboard, and you see at every C there's a number. So right by this C, there's a 1. That's, in technical terms, that is called C1. The next C up is C2. So all of our notes are that we want to select are, this is the highest note that we want to select. So that is G1. So then notes between G1, and we just type this in here, G1, and this goes down to F0. And we might actually want to do that the opposite way, where it's F0 first and G1 second. And then if we apply, oh, we have to select all these, and then we apply, right? So let me show you that again. So I have this set up for the notes I want to select. I select all, which is, I have this hovering, I've got my cursor just hovering in this area, Command A. It selects all these notes. Then I want to apply this, and it just selects those bottom notes. And then I can copy that and then merge paste that here, and then just delete that last note that we don't need that's up here by just clicking, dragging, and hitting the delete key, just like that. And now we've got our bass notes in there. I'm going to start from the very beginning again and just do the quantizing and the note splitting all again, all right? So if I go to File and I select Revert to Saved, it's going to reopen the session just like I opened it first, with all of these other things I've done undone. What I want to say about all these software programs, Logic, Pro Tools, Cubase, Ableton, Reaper, they all have many ways to do the same thing. And the more of the ways that you learn, the faster your workflow will be, because there are some times where one function is better than another function. And knowing them all, you'll be, just from experience, you'll be able to make choices very quickly, and it'll enhance your workflow. Okay, so let's talk about quantizing again. So I'm going to highlight this track just by clicking on it with the grabber tool, or if I had the selector tool, I could just double click on it. And notice this is grayed out, and it's highlighted here as well. So that means when I go down here to the MIDI editor and open that up, that's the track that we'll see in here. Now, the MIDI editor right now is too small. I can't see it. So I'm going to resize it by clicking here and dragging up. And notice when you click by this border right here, you have to move your mouse until the shape changes, right? So I'm moving my mouse up and down, and that's right there. The shape is changing to the cross. I can click there and drag down, click there and drag up, just to resize that. And then if these are all highlighted right now, that means they're all selected. If you want to deselect them, just click anywhere in this field with the grabber tool, or if you're on the selector tool, right, you would just click up in the ruler area here. Now, because we set up keyboard focus here with A to Z, when we go to the MIDI editor, which is this, when we're in this area, we know that this is active. I didn't talk about this before. I might have talked about this last week. We know that this area is active because there is a gold or yellow bar around the perimeter. And when we go here, the gold bar transfers to this area here. It's very subtle. I wish what they would do would, when this is active, this would become light gray, and this would become dark gray. And then when this is active, this would become light gray, and the top one would become dark gray. This way, that's, I think, would be a better way to know which one is active. But so it goes. This is the way it is. All right? All these programs can be made better. So we've got our piano one here. And I played it in, and like I said earlier, I think it would be better. It's fine. If I was going to make a performance of this, I wouldn't edit the timing because I think it's fine. But I want to teach you how to do more functions, so I'm going to teach you how to quantize. So to open the quantize window, you want to hold the Option key and hit 0. And it could be this 0 or this 0 for this one. Either one works fine. So if you're on a laptop, you can hit this 0. And notice if you hit the 0 again, it goes away. So this is the event operations window. And this event operation has all these functions. And we're only going to work today with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the top 5. Those are the ones I use the most, and I also use step input. The rest of them I don't use at all. Okay, so every one of these notes in the piano roll editor here are MIDI events. And the MIDI event, right, so this is something I forgot to talk about last week when I was showing you about the cables hooking up and all that stuff. When we're using MIDI right now, we have a USB cable hooked up from our keyboard controller to our computer. And that USB cable is sending MIDI information into Pro Tools. It's triggering the soft synths, it's inputting notes and other data. So I'm just going to hide this window for a second. But each one of these events, and again, see, as I keep on talking about this stuff, other things occur to me that I should talk to you about. So each one of these events has multiple parameters. This note here has a starting point, right, which is bar 1, beat 1. It has a duration. It starts here and ends here. It has a pitch. Each one of these things is a MIDI parameter, a MIDI event. They're all happening just from inputting this note. And it also has a velocity and a note on velocity. So that means how fast you press the key down gets translated into one of 127 velocity levels. The MIDI spec, as it lives now, and there will be an upgraded MIDI spec coming at some point in the near future with more levels of resolution, has 127 levels of everything. 127 levels of MIDI volume, 127 levels of MIDI velocity, stuff like that. So all that stuff is contained on that event. What we are concerned right now is the start of that event and making sure it happens on a grid. And I've been teaching you to do that manually. And right now, as I showed you earlier in the class, I want to show you how to do that with an automated process. And that's called quantizing. So I hit the Option key and press down the 0, and it brings up the event operations window. And it defaults to quantize because quantize is the most often used one. So what do you quantize? Well, right now we're just going to quantize the note on, which is the beginning of the note. And our quantize grid is the resolution of our quantizing. And what we want to do is find the lowest, the smallest note value. For this piece, it's these two notes here, which are 16th notes. So I'm going to click, and it brings us up a menu. Now notice Pro Tools has a lot of these menus, right? So if I click up here for our grid resolution, it's got the same menu. If I click over here for our grid resolution, it's got the same similar menu. They all look the same, and that keeps things consistent for you when you're working. You're not looking at something different and trying to learn something new. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click 16th note. All right. And then I'm going to select, let's just work on the first 4 measures. And I'm going to click here. And I always personally find it easier to go from after the phrase to the beginning of the phrase, especially when it starts right at the beginning of the measure. Click and drag like all the way here. So let me just show you my mouse technique here. So I'm just going to click and drag. That's all selected. Alternatively, what you can do is click and lasso all these notes. Now, if you miss some notes, if you hold the Shift key down, you can let go of the mouse and they still stay selected. And then you can click and drag over the notes you've missed. All right, so this is mouse technique. Let me show you that again. I'm going to just click and lasso all these notes. Right? Well, I've got some notes I don't want and I've missed some notes. So if I hold the Shift key down, I can click on that and deselect it. I can click on this and select it, or I can lasso across like this and select the rest of these, and then they're all selected. So that's one of a couple of ways that you can select those notes. So those are selected right now. And let me zoom in. All right, we can see that this note here is early. These two notes are early. So I'm going to apply, and you see they get all snapped to the grid. Great. Now, I'm going to undo that. What happens if I want to fix the length of the notes? So this note is a little bit too long. This note is a little bit too long. This note goes a little bit past the grid as does this. So what I could do is I could quantize the note off, which is when you release your finger from the keyboard. So note on is when you press the keyboard. Note off is when you let go. All right. So I'm going to quantize the note on and the note off. And now everything is perfect, which again is not always musical, not often musical, but I'm just teaching you these techniques right now. Now, the one other thing I wanted to show you, and I got a little confused before because I tried to do something I don't normally do, is that, well, before I get there, you've got your tuplets. So if you've got a triplet, you could quantize 3 in the time of 2. If it's a quintuplet of 16th notes, you can quantize 5 in the time of 4, right? You can offset the grid, which means you move it left or right. If you want something to sound later, you can move it so that it's behind the beat, in front of the beat. It's so many things that you can do here. I don't want to confuse the issue, but the one that you should know is most often is if you've got triplets, it's 3 in the time of 2. And then you turn it off and it's not active. So let's quantize and make it better but not perfect, strength. So everything will go within 90% perfect. So let's watch what happens here. And watch what happens is usually in the key of E flat, by the way. So let's click right here. And notice that this looks perfect, but it's actually still a little bit before, but not perfect. And the note lengths got better, but not perfect because I had the note off also selected. So those are the two things that you should know. Don't worry about the include within and exclude within for right now. Just the strength, note on, note off, quantize grid, and tuplet. That's a lot to learn. So I'm just going to quantize the rest of this. Select and apply. And then that's quantized. Now, again, I'm going to say this again. That's not always desirable. The human feel is what makes music alive. But you do need to learn how to use these things. And if you're not a good keyboard player, which is the way that most things are input, this will help you to take your performance and make it more acceptable, more rhythmically acute or accurate. But you can quantize things and not do it perfect so it doesn't sound mechanical. All right, and that's what the strength function does. Now, changing the pitch of a note. Right? Last week, I think it was last week, I showed you that you can use the up arrow to go up in half steps. and the down arrow to go down in half steps. There we go. If you hold the shift and push the up arrow, it goes up an octave. And then Command Z undoes that. Now, if you're working on this note and you want to work on the next note, right, you can click there. But if you push the right arrow, you see it navigates to the next note. If you push the back arrow, it goes backwards in time. All right. But let's say you want to quantize everything, transpose everything. So you select all, which is Command A, and then so Option and the letter T for transpose. Brings up our event operations transpose. So we're just going to work with this right here for today. Let's say I wanted to transpose everything up a major third, right? So let's look at our keyboard here. This is well, you can't really see that properly. All right, let's do that here. So if this is C, a major third is 2 whole steps. So you go from C to D and D to E, right? But this says semitones. So we're going to go from C up to E. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 semitones. So let me select everything, enter 4 semitones, and then this becomes blue. And watch what happens to all these as you apply it. They all get transposed up. And then Option Z undoes that. So you can transpose things up all over the place. You can set all the notes to one pitch, but let's just do this. This is good if you want to. Let's say I've got this piece done, right? And I copy all that. And I want to make a second verse, and I want the second verse to be in a different key, right? Well, Option, wait, hold on. Command D will duplicate everything. Did I go over that last week? Right? Command D duplicates everything. And let's say I want the second time through to be a minor third higher. Option T, that's 3 semitones. And then my second time through is a minor third higher. So let's, and do a chord change to transpose us. Right, so we're transposed that whole bit up. Hold on a second, let me make sure everything's back. Okay, so that's quantizing, all right? You just got to practice it. It becomes easy, you know, it becomes easy as you do it. You learn all the when you need it and when you don't need it. But it's a good way to do it. As I said earlier, I like to spoon feed. I taught you how to do things manually. I could have taught you quantizing right off the bat. That would be equally valid, but then I'd have to go back and teach you mouse skills. So I like to start off with the mouse skills first inside of Pro Tools, right? Because it is a very graphic program. Every DAW is graphic, right? You've got this piano roll is very graphic. So learning how to use the mouse to do things, it's very helpful. That being said, getting off the mouse, like in other words, if I wanted to transpose, right, and I didn't know the key command, I'd have to go up to Event, Event Operations, Transpose. Menu surfing with the mouse is definitely a way to slow you down and ruin your creativity. Having mouse skills when you're editing combined with understanding keyboard functions, will really help speed up your workflow. You become like a Pro Tools or a Logic or a Cubase ninja. Okay, so we've got our piece here. Let me just get a drink. My voice is very tired. I spoke on the phone for a long time this morning, and I had a class before this and this class, so I've been talking a lot today. All right, so we want a bass line, we want an accompaniment, we want a melody and we want to orchestrate, right? So those are the three things, much like what I assigned for you this week. Or next week it's due, right? Yes. So I'm going to open this up in the Midi editor. And I want a bass line. And there's several ways to do this. Okay, so let me switch to our keyboard view. So our part here is broken up into chords and a bass line. So the quick thing to do is just hold down, hover somewhere over here, click and drag and select all these notes. Now this note I don't want, so if I hold the Shift key and click, it will disappear. And I can copy that, right, which is Command C. Use my my selector tool, go right here, hit return, and merge paste, which is Option M. And we've got something in here for the bass. Great. Let me show you another way to do that. I know that it's all these low notes and there's a big separation between the high notes. If I hover over the MIDI keyboard or the piano roll over here, notice that my grabber turns into a flat little tool. It's almost like a selector turned sideways. That's exactly what it is. So I click and drag down, the same thing happens. All those notes get selected. Another tip, if I only want to select this pitch here and here, I can just obviously drag, or I can just click on this piano keyboard and they all get selected. Again, there's like so many ways to do everything, right? Everybody talks about how Pro Tools doesn't have great MIDI. And I don't know if it has great MIDI, but it has very good functionality in MIDI. It's overlooked. So, okay, so I'm going to click and drag down, and I want to select all those, but I want to get rid of this note here. So I'm just going to go back to my grabber tool, hold the Shift key down, and click on that. And then again, I can copy and merge paste. Now, I can also click like this, select everything. And then let's say I call up our quantize window, which is Option 0. Before I had you right click. That's a little cumbersome. I called up quantize because it's easy to remember Option 0, or you can call up transpose Option T because that's easy to remember. But then you can click on this menu and you can select split notes. So I figured out that all the bass notes were between F0 and G1. So I set this up here and I can hit apply and it selects those notes. Again, this note we don't need, so we Shift click, and then I can copy those and paste those. All right.
Professor, copying is a Command C, right?
Correct mundo.
All right.
And merge paste is hold on a second. Command V. But merge paste, which is what I want you to do, is Option M. And the reason why I want you to merge paste is that it takes your clips and it gives them the name of the track properly. So you don't have to, it saves you a step later on. Okay? All right, so let's get our bass line here. And we've got some melody, some chords, right? So let me show you another trick. I could copy all this and paste it here. No problem. What I could also do is hold down the Option key, and I've got the grabber tool. Click and drag this down to the steel string. Now, I'm going to show you how to fix the name. And click and drag this down to the strings. So to fix the name, you're going to do something called consolidate clip, right? Which is in the edit window. It's Option Shift 3 is the keyboard shortcut. And it renamed the track. And Option Shift 3, and it renamed the track. So that's an important key command, Option Shift 3. Now, I'm going to play this. Without this, I got the melody there. Whoops, let me get my bass line. Now, look at this. I pasted this in the wrong spot, right? I can use the trimmer tool, the grabber tool, and click and just drag that back to the beginning. So you can drag these clips everywhere. And another way to duplicate something is to Option, click, and drag. All right, so Option, clicking, and dragging is in every Mac program, it's a function for doing something. So if I play what we've got now. All right, great. Let's work on this a little bit and create our arrangement. Now, let's listen to the steel string. I've soloed it. I have a solo button up here. So this is supposed to be a steel string guitar. So what's wrong with that? What needs to be improved? I'll play it again from the beginning.
Maybe the notes don't sound, it doesn't really sound like a guitar. It doesn't sound like they're being strummed.
Right, so listen to if I strum this guitar. Right? Or, yes.
That's reverb.
What?
It sounds like it has a little bit more reverb to it.
It might. I have to look at the patch and see if it's got it. But that doesn't really bother me. But it doesn't. Right. So there's the first thing is that it's all sounding like all the notes are sounding together instead of being strummed. And you might want to make a pattern. And the other thing that Alan wrote in here that's also true is that that note is not on an acoustic guitar. Well, on a regular acoustic guitar. These notes are all too low. So we don't really need them. So we can get rid of them. We can do the same thing we did before. Click, drag down. We'd select all those, right? So basically, let me do that again. Now that we're in view, I'm clicking and dragging down. I've selected all those. And to get rid of those, it's very simple. Just hit the delete key. That already is 5 times better because it sounds like it's in the pitch register of an acoustic guitar, right? So this is what it was. right? So especially when we get here, like these notes here are way too low for an acoustic guitar, and they would get in the way of the bass guitar, right? So I like to write things and arrange things so that there's not a lot of activity in the low end, right? There's a couple of instruments that are holding the low end together. And if you've got too many things going on, they confuse the point and it makes it more difficult to mix later. So we've got two options here. We can create a finger or flat picking broken chord arpeggiation, and we went over that a little bit last week, right? We could separate this out with Command E, and we can make something that goes, I don't know, like I get rid of these and this. And then maybe make this long so it's like it's sustaining. Something like this. Right? So that's something the guitarist would do. That's one thing we can do, and I'm just undoing everything with repeated Command Z's. Or we can get off of grid mode and we go to slip mode, and we can just use the trimmer tool and just trim the beginnings so that they look like that. And that, a little strum. And then we do the same thing here. And I like to go from the bottom to the top. So like I'm strumming down with something this slow. It's not a fast strum. Oh, not enough, right? You could hear when it sounded faker. That second one doesn't sound right. All right. If I go from the top. And you could really get lazy with it, right? Right? So you could, you play around with this. This is your discretion, your taste. And then let's say right here, we want to arrange this, right? So then maybe here is where our broken arpeggio comes in. And then boop ba da da. I do like that, boop ba ba ba. So the bass note. So we get rid of these two. So I'm just clicking and dragging. And then I'll get rid of this. And I'll get rid of this. I don't need these. And like that. And then what I want to do, see, listen to this. That's not how a guitar sounds, right? When you play that kind of a thing, the note, you keep your hand fretted and those notes sustain. So what I'm going to do is make these notes sustain right to the next attack, and that'll sound. Right? And then make this. So let's listen to that so far. And then here on this one, we could play around with the direction of the arpeggio, and we can make it something like this. Yes, was there a question?
Yeah, sorry, Professor. I was just going to ask, can you go over one more time how you got it to not snap to grid?
Yes. Do you see right here are your edit modes in the MIDI editor, and then on the upper left-hand side of the arrange page, there is a corresponding, or for the edit window, there are a corresponding set of edit tools. So this one up here is for this area here.
Yeah.
And this one here is for this area down here. And if you go to slip mode, which is the green one. So for right now in our class, we're just going to be, and just click on it, on the green one, slip, or the blue one, grid. Those are the only two that we're going to be using, I think, this for this class. All right, so I'm on slip
you.
to do the rolls, you know, the slow strums. All right, so where was I? I was here. Right, so if I do something like this, right, and then we can just make these. And then go back to slip. So seriously, this is like, if you can't play keyboards and play these things in, these are the tools that you would use to help you. And like if we just solo the electric bass with that. So some of those bass notes are too low, right? You can hear they sound very muddy. So if we want to select the bass track, we would go over here into this area here, and we would click on this. This is the 10 E bass. Click to the left of that, make that dot, and then unhighlight the steel string. So let's take a listen. That note is fine. That note's fine. These are where it starts getting too low, right? So I'm going to select all those notes, and I want to transpose those up an octave. So what is the quick way to do that? From right here, not opening up the transpose window.
Shift and up?
Correct. Shift and up. Now, this D is lower than what a bass normally plays, but a bass usually goes down. Some basses can go down to C, 4-string basses. 5-string basses go down lower. But somebody might have a C extension on their bass, their electric bass. They have, if it's an acoustic bass, they have a thing that goes at the end of the fingerboard on the low string that gives you an extra third down. An electric bass, if it's not a 5-string bass, they've got a little thing that you can snap on and off that makes you be able to play that lower pitch. But it doesn't sound bad going down to that D, but anything lower than that would not sound good. So going up. So we can already see here that once I stopped editing it, the guitar part went really. So this is also starting to, I don't think this is such a great piece of music, but it's useful for our purposes here. It's starting to really bore me. So I'm going to pick the tempo up. Now to change the tempo, I'm at measure 1. And I'm right here. I'm going to double click on this, or just click on it once, and our tempo change comes up. And I'm going to type in 94. So I'm making it much faster. Too fast, right? I didn't like that. So let's just make it a little bit faster then. Better. It's not so pondering. So I'm going to just quickly go through and edit the rest of the guitar part, and I'll talk about it, but I'm just going to, I want to get this done because I want to get on to the rest of the arrangement, all right? So just follow along the best you can. Now, there are key commands to switch this. If you've got an extended keyboard and you've got the functions set up, Notice I can switch between all of these grids by using these key commands, right? So I can just go F2 to F4 to get between grid and slip. And so let's go to slip, get our trimmer tool. Go to grid, and then I'm going to make all these arpeggiations. Now, I want to show you another trick. In a second here. Okay, so now I can do a cool, like a nice little rhythm here, right? So if I want to do ba-da, ba-dum, right? I can do that very easily. I can just delete this and then snap all these over and then go to slip mode, get my trimmer, and just have these broken a little bit. A little bit too much.
Professor?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, I had another question about, so when you're in slip mode, is there like a key that you can press that will enable you to like make more precise mouse movements, or make the sensitivity less
What
when
you
you're
can, yeah, right. So what you can do is if you zoom in more and using the
Okay.
R or the T key. Here, so if I'm here and I zoom in, then I can get very, very detailed. This is how far I want it to be, which is easier to do than if I'm zoomed out like this. You see that?
Yeah.
So, hold on. You see right here, I've got key focus set up. A and Z on the upper right-hand corner
Oh
is
yes.
amber. So if I hit the T key, see how I'm zooming in?
Mhm.
And that gives me quite a bit of resolution as opposed to being out here, which is really difficult.
Okay.
And we can have a nice lazy roll on the end. Now, another thing we can do is we can play around with the inversion. So let's listen to here. If I take this note here and I transpose that up an octave, right? And maybe this goes up an octave as well. And then I would just have to play around with the just the timing so that we have our roll intact. Okay, so that sounds pretty good. I'm good with that. And what I'm going to do is Command S, save often. All right. I've got these two tracks muted. All right, so I've got the M here for mute. If I click on that, they're unmuted. But now I've got them muted, so you won't hear them. Now let's take a listen to our strings. Now, as compared to just the guitar, they sound much better than the guitar because string bass goes down that low. But let's listen to the string bass and the electric bass, all right? I mean, the strings and the electric bass. The bass is doing that. I think I want to let the bass do that by itself, okay? I don't need to have the strings doing that as well. And so that's the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of all those low notes on the strings. That being said, there's another option too. So I'm going to do a few things. And this is part of why this is such a cool skill, cool study, because you can learn arranging and you can play around with things and then just undo and get back to where you were. So I'm saving this as it is. And I'm going to open up my strings. And I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm going to click and get rid of all these low notes. I'm sorry, let me change that again to here. Right, I'm going to click and delete. Now, you can do that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. No, you can do that. But now let's listen to what we've got with the steel string. What if we did this? What if I clicked here, right? I'm on the strings in the arrange page. I'm going to click and drag to the right. I'm going to select all that, and I'm going to delete that. What do we have now? And now the strings come in. Right? They're too loud, but you see now we're making an arrangement. Right? So that's one thing you can do. And we're going to work on that further because I think that's the direction we're going to go in. But let's do this. Let's do that. So that's good, right? Too loud. Now, your first instinct will be too loud. This says volume. Let me bring this down. For MIDI tracks, I don't want you for right now, it would be best if you didn't touch this. When we do audio tracks, you can touch that. For MIDI tracks, we want to do MIDI volume. So I'm just going to bring that down a little bit. See that? Much better, right? This is full. That's like the strings are yelling at you, and it's supposed to be a delicate moment. So we're going to make it delicate by bringing the volume down. So that's nice. Let's do some more arranging, all right? Now, most of you can read music, is that correct? Like, I think there's only, Jeremy might be the only person who can't read music. So we're going to do notation next week, for not next week's class. Excuse me, notation isn't Pro Tools' strong suit, but you can do a little notation with it. So right here, see there's a little notes, a couple of notes. Click on that. Opens up a basic notation window. Now you can see this, these chords here. I'm going to solo it right here. So let's talk about these chords. Somebody start giving me descriptions of what these chords are. How many notes in each chord?
Three.
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 Oh.
There's three because this is right. And what kind of position are they? Are they close or open?
They look pretty closed.
Right. And what I mean by close, for those of you that aren't music majors, is that this is a C chord in the first inversion, meaning that the E is the lowest note. The next pitch in that chord is a G, which means it's here. And the next note in that chord is a C, which is here. There's no other chord tones missing between that spacing. So that's called close position, right? What if I wanted to change that to open position? Very easy to do. So let me go back. It's easier to do in piano roll than it is in notation. So let me use my grabber tool, and I'm going to select the middle note of these chords, all right? So I'm going to hold the shift key down. Let me switch my view here. Hold the shift key down, click on every one of these notes that's in the middle. And then I'm going to transpose them up an octave using the shift and the up arrow. That's much more interesting, right? But what if we did this? More arranging. We left the first few the way they are, and then here we switched here. On the last, so the first two measures is close, and then we open it up for the last three measures. Right? So that's an arrangement. Now, let me also teach you guys a trick with MIDI strings. For long sustained notes on MIDI strings, when you're changing chords and you have a common tone between the chords, it's best not to attack the note again if you want it to sound smooth. So what do I mean? What do I mean by that? You see between this chord here and this chord here, this is your common tone, right? I want this to be one note, not two notes. Not for real players, but for MIDI strings, all right? So Option Shift 3 heals that. So now that's one note. And then the same here. Option Shift 3, these three notes. It took me years to figure this out. That's so much better already, right? You could tell that that's sounding like it's breathing more, because one of the things you want to do is you want to mask the fact that these are MIDI notes. So the attack is what can give it away, especially with these cheaper string libraries. Oh, we got it right here too. So by holding these notes over and letting just a few of them change, you're sort of dovetailing the attacks, and it masks a lot of the MIDI. It masks a lot of the things about MIDI that make this sound bad. See how much smoother that sounds? All right. All right, so let's right now, we're gonna work for a little bit longer on this, and then we'll do a little bit of more work on this next week. And so when you're working on your piece that's due next week, right? you will, any of these techniques that you can add into it, deploy them. Let's do our melody. So I'm going to copy this. So we have flute and oboe are our melody instruments, right? So I'm going to merge paste it there. I'm going to merge paste it here. Whoops, I missed. So I just click and drag this here. Now, I don't want the oboe and the flute to be playing all the time. I want them to be playing individually sometimes, and sometimes I want them to be playing together. Sometimes I want them to be playing the same pitch, and sometimes I want them to be playing an octave apart. So those are our options, right? And how do we deploy that? Well, that's your skill as an arranger and an orchestrator and your tastes, which will determine that. There's no wrong or right answer. There are things that are wrong. So it's very helpful when you're doing this if you understand the registers of an instrument and where they sound best. So for example, this flute, I'm going to just solo this. It really sounds mechanical. All right, so the negligibly speaking, because these are such bad samples, the oboe sounds better in that range. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this in the flute. I'm just going to make a quick arrangement, all right, in the edit window. So that's way too loud, so I'm going to bring that down. And then for the second half, I'm going to transpose this up an octave and have that blend in with the oboe. So that needs to come down. Come down in volume. And then we can get rid of all this here. And maybe this time through we just have the flute. And then this here, now look, I'm going to work here in the arrange window or the edit page. And I've highlighted this whole area so that these two notes and these notes here are selected. And then I'm going to do Option T. And I'm going to transpose that up an octave, right? So there's different ways of doing things. Oh, this one here needs to be transposed too. No. All right, I'll leave it the way it is. What happens if I transpose this up an octave again? This might be too high. So that's not a flute anymore. That's a piccolo, right? That's way too high for the flute. So keep that at the regular octave. So do I think that this is really great? No, it needs a lot of work. All right, and those sounds are, and the sounds in the rhythm section are fine, but the sounds in the flute and the oboe, that needs a lot of work. And but what I would say to you right now is that if this is what you handed in for your assignment, this would be worth an A for this class, right? Something like this. Easily an A. So, because this is really just basics and understanding the fundamentals of how to do this work. There's volume automation that we can get into a little bit. That would make the flute and the oboe sound much better. And what do I mean by that? Well, let me just show you. This is way beyond what we need to learn in this class. So this is our MIDI editor. Right here, the bottom left-hand corner of this blue color coding thingy, there's a triangle that faces to the right. So click on that, and it opens up this other area here. I was almost going to sneeze. This is the edit lane, and all MIDI editors and all the DAWs have something like this. This can be resized by clicking here and selecting a size, right? Or hovering here, clicking and dragging down. Now, on this edit lane, right here, this is the edit lane view selector. Right now, it's stuck to velocity, and you notice for every note, there is one of these velocity things. What you can do is you can select all these like this, click and drag this down. That's a little bit better. I brought the velocity down. It's not as in your face. But if you click here into the lane view selector and you go to MIDI volume, right? When a musician, pianists and percussion instruments do it differently. But one of the things that a skilled player does is they animate the sound they create using their playing technique. So, for example, if a flute player plays a note, if they blow harder, they get a certain sound. If they blow softer, they get a different sound. They could play a long note. They can start off blowing softer. They can add more pressure, and the note gets louder, and then they could reduce the pressure, and the note gets softer. Violinists can start off and play a note, bringing the bow across the strings, and the right hand is very steady on that one note. And as they're bringing the note across the string, they can vibrate, they can shake the pitch, and you get vibrato as the note is unfolding over time. So let's say a note is 5 or 6 seconds long. The first 2 or 3 seconds have no vibrato. The next 2 seconds has vibrato, and the last 2 seconds has no vibrato. So over time, they are animating the sound, and that's one of the big things that makes humans sound so great. So with this particular set of samples that Expand has, it's very weak on functionality compared to what state-of-the-art samples are now. But we can do learn a few principles to make this sound a little bit better. So what we can do is, and again, this is not, I don't expect this on your assignment, but if you can do a little bit of this, then it's great. So we're in slip mode, and we're going to use the pencil right here. And we're going to automate, right? We're going to have the machine do it automatically, the volume. So there's an alliteration. Automate to animate. A little alliterative thing I've come up with. So let's have the sound fade in a little bit, right? So I'm just going to click here and drag down. And then have it fade down here. It's a little bit too fast, right? And then we can do some phrasing. Boo doo dee doo. Maybe make this note not quite as long. And do a little bit of that here. So a little bit down. And then up. And then down. Right? So you can even do it when the notes sustain. And you can draw a little U shape. Went a little too far. Yes, exactly, Salita. So I'm drawing it in, all right? If you were to look at my film scores, you would see I have it going on MIDI volume. I've got it going on like several parameters that affects the sound because I've got more advanced sounds in this. But you can learn the principles by doing a little bit like this. And this sounds better. And then what's really cool is that so measure 3. The flute comes in at measure 3. So if I have the oboe, right, I can use my grid and I can copy with the selector. I can copy this whole little bit here, right? So I've highlighted that and I'm doing Command C. So I'm at measure 2, beat 4, 480, and I'm going to go to the same place in the flute. I have to get my grid set up. And I can paste that in. And it doesn't erase the notes of the flute, but notice in the flute, you've added that. Right, so it's a little bit better. It makes it a little bit better. It's never going to be great with these particular sounds in this from Expand, but it'll definitely make it better. So I think next week we've had 2 hours. I think that like I've shown you like so much stuff right now, basically like 2 classes worth of stuff. Again, I'll get the review video up. They'll be up on YouTube. So that you can review any of this stuff. And what I do with the review videos, I don't know if you've watched them, but I put chapters. And they're in the description, and typically, unless I forget, they're in the pinned comment at the top of the page, so that you can click on a chapter to get to a particular subject instead of a topic, instead of having to watch the entire video to get to something at minute 30. So I try to organize that to make it a little bit easier for you. All right. So I think at this point, we're going to call it a night. I want to thank you all for being here, and just, do your best. And, hopefully some of the stuff we talked about before, maybe it'll spark an idea in you that'll help you get through this situation a little bit better. Right. Have a good night, everyone.